Tonga's main internet cable connecting the kingdom to the rest of the world is finally back up and running. It's been more than 5 weeks since the undersea fibre optic cable was damaged during a huge volcanic eruption and tsunami, and crews have been working around the clock to get the cable restored, and yesterday people abroad were finally able to reconnect through video links with their loved ones. Reporter Tahlea Aualiitia joins me now. Good to have you with us again. This must be such a big relief because there was some connectivity but nothing really substantial.
Yeah, and we remember this all kicked off back on January 15 with the eruption of the Tonga Hapai volcano and subsequent tsunami. So it literally just wiped Tonga off from the rest of the world and its connectivity. There were makeshift satellite connections, but the connection just wasn't strong or wasn't reliable. So it's been 38 days that a lot of people had been desperately waiting to have just a conversation, a video chat with their loved ones back in Tonga, and that finally happened yesterday. I know that my social media feeds with all my Tongan friends were saying how excited they were, and it was just nice to be able to see their loved one's face and to do that. And just an example of that is that the ABC's Pacific Beat program did an interview with the Tongan Prime Minister yesterday morning, and that interview you could barely make out any of the words he was saying. By the time that connection was restored, it was back to being perfect again. And you know, this undersea fibre optic cable is Tonga's one internet cable to the rest of the world. So people had been waiting a really long time to, you know, be able to video call their friends and family.
Because it's something we take so much for granted. Just how extensive was this work?
So let me put it into context. This cable is 840 kilometres long. It connects Tonga to Fiji, and it's the size of a garden hose. So imagine putting a garden hose from Melbourne to Wollongong and then having that underwater, having a volcano and a tsunami come in and then trying to fix that. So even when I spoke to the chair of Tonga Cable a few days after the initial eruption, he was warning that it was going to take weeks to do. So what was involved is that there are only select ships that can actually even do this kind of work. That ship was the Reliance, which is run by a US company called Subcom. That ship was in PNG back in January. So it picked up crew, made sure that they were COVID vaccinated. The crew then went to Samoa on the ship to pick up extra cables. And then they actually only started work on February 3rd because, of course, the volcano, you had to make sure that it was safe for people to be underwater.
Yes.
Absolutely. So they had obviously a few challenges doing it because the cable was smashed in various ways, and there was actually 55 kilometres of cable they couldn't find, and they imagine that has been buried underwater. So all up, it took 90 kilometres of cable they had to replace. 60 kilometres actually came from a customer that was being held on the ship, and 30 kilometres from their own supplies. So, you know, even just in their working, and they were working 24/7 for 18 days. On Monday the 21st, they got it where they wanted to do, and then they just needed to do testing, and then they were finally able to flick the switch. And just remembering, this is the international cable. The domestic cable that links the outer islands to the main island of Tongatapu, that is still being worked on. When it comes to the cost, because this isn't cheap, they're expecting it to be about $1.4 million. Wow. So yeah, very expensive work.
Now, Tahlea, when we think about just how vulnerable that is now, are they thinking about some sort of backup proposition? Because you'd think underwater with that kind of vulnerability that could happen again.
Absolutely. And this isn't the first time this has happened. Back in 2019, the cable was damaged and Tonga was offline for 2 weeks. So the calls of going, hey, maybe we need to get a second cable started singing out. The problems with that is, one, cost. They are not cheap and they also have to be maintained. The second issue is, where would you put it? The fact that this cable here is near a volcano and, you know, Tonga is near the Pacific Ring of Fire where earthquakes happen very often and underwater as well. There was just one last night. Just goes to show the vulnerability of where you would put a cable like this. They are obviously working on the logistics. The one good thing that kind of came out, well, there are good things, but one of the good things that came out of the disaster was that Elon Musk, you know, of course, linked to Starlink and SpaceX, he actually donated 50 VSAT satellites to Tonga. And so in a press release from the Prime Minister tonight, he obviously thanked Elon Musk for those satellites. He said that they will be connected around in all the islands in Tonga. And he said that he hoped that this was the beginning of a continued working working relationship. So maybe watch that space when it comes to some continuity plans. Exactly.
In space or underwater, one of the
Exactly.
two. Very sci-fi. Great to talk. Thanks, Tahlea.
Thanks, Bev.